Hello and welcome everybody into the War and Peace Baseball Fantasy Podcast for the week. I know you're all surprised that you were hearing my voice. I am Ray Estrada and not Ui's voice. He is unavailable tonight, but he finally taught us how to record these podcasts, so we are able to do it in his stead. I am along here with Alex Roude. How are you doing tonight, Alex?
Outstanding. How about you, Ray?
I am doing very good. It is late while we're recording this.
Yes, it's a near midnight late edition of the Fantasy Podcast. We're just making it.
Yep, but we have no responsibilities in the mornings tomorrow, so who cares about sleep?
Exactly.
So let's get right into it. Let's talk about some of the top stories this week. One thing that we didn't touch on the main show that came out on Tuesday was the Matt Harvey suspension. He was suspended for 3 games. He was scheduled to start on Sunday for the Mets, but he did not show up to the ballpark at all on Saturday, and was thus handed a 3-game suspension without pay. And by not addressing it on what was it, Monday night for us, more has come out about what has happened to Matt Harvey and why he was not at the ballpark on Saturday. It turns out he was out late Friday evening, clubbing and whatnot, and then went golfing Saturday morning, and then came down with a migraine. Surprise, surprise. And yeah, there's been rumblings coming from the Mets players that this is kind of expected of Matt Harvey, and it's definitely not the best look for him. I mean, what's your whole take on the thing, Rudy?
I just think it's really embarrassing on his part. I mean, he basically admitted that he was partying, and that's why he didn't show up, which is ridiculous. And also, he tried to save face by blaming the Mets, and I think he basically filed for unfair treatment or something along those lines.
He filed a grievance because he said he couldn't come because of a migraine, but that migraine
right, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's not like he was pitching on Saturday. He would have had to do a bullpen session at most, I'm sure. I mean, come on, man. Take a few Advil, suck it up, and go ahead. Also, it's unbelievably irresponsible to. I'm fine with players having lives and going out at night during the regular season. I also understand, especially for a starting pitcher living in New York, between starts, it's tempting to pursue their life. Go ahead, but to honestly be that irresponsible, he's not a young man. He's not like he's a 20-year-old rookie. He's in his late 20s. He's been through this. He's been through the rounds many times. This is ridiculous. I think it's just so unprofessional of him, and it's not like he's Clayton Kershaw, and this is his one grievance his entire career. I mean, he's been pretty inconsistent recently, ever since that World Series appearance, injury prone. I mean, it's just, you're supposed to be a leader on your team. You're supposed to be the leader of your staff, and this is the face you're showing. This is what you're demonstrating to the rest of your team. This is how much you care about your team's season, that you blame a night of partying. And honestly, considering how poor season's been so far, it's just ridiculous. I mean, he should be really embarrassed.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
It's not a. I'm gonna use this word that I've heard a lot: optics. It's not good optics. One anonymous Mets player said today, he wants to be Derek Jeter, and he said, "This is not how you beat Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter would have been at the ballpark on Saturday. Granted, Derek Jeter's an everyday player." But Derek Jeter, even on off days, wouldn't get caught out escaping team activities by clubbing, which Derek Jeter could easily do, considering all the women he's pulled.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just bad.
I mean, it's just an unnecessary distraction for a team that's fighting for the playoffs, and there's a lot of veterans who, I'm sure are trying to set the example for the next young crop of guys. Because this Mets team really doesn't have any guys in there. Really doesn't have a lot of guys in their primes. It's a lot of guys who are either in their 30s and are veterans, or they're very young and entering the stage. And Harvey's one of the few guys who's actually in his supposed prime of his career and is supposed to be, the face.
Yeah, I mean, it's
face of the franchise, and this is what he's demonstrating is just ridiculous.
It's
And
just
yeah,
embarrassing. He's gonna pitch on Friday. Now, I know this is a fantasy podcast, but I just wanted to touch on that since we didn't get to it on Monday. So let's move into more of the fantasy aspect. One of the bigger injury news, at least in my little Dodger bubble, Andrew Toles is out more than likely out for the year. He tore his ACL trying to preserve Urias' no-hitter the other night. The bigger question here is not necessarily about Toles. I think the bigger impact is Cody Bellinger in terms of the Dodgers. Outfield situation now that he has that space all to himself now that he's gonna take. Unfortunately, at the expense of Toles' ACL.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty much guaranteed that Bellinger is going to stand up for the entire season unless he really starts struggling, which it seems incredibly unlikely. Even when Adrian Gonzalez comes back, I'm sure Bellinger will just move to the outfield. I don't know how skilled he is defensively, but it seems like he's more than athletic enough to hold this on the left field, and his bat seems to be so effective that it won't even matter. And I say for fantasy owners who own Bellinger, that's the best news they could have possibly heard, honestly. And it's fortunate that, it's a year-long potentially career-damaging injury that led to this. I would never, wish. I'm sure Bellinger is not happy either. That's the way that he's going to stay in the majors this year. But, for owners of Bellinger like me, it's incredible news. And I would say if Bellinger is tradable in your league and there's someone who maybe isn't privy to this information yet, I would definitely try to take advantage of this and get your hands on him, because he is a monster, and he's definitely just between him and Seager, the Dodgers might have the best 1-2 young pair in the league offensively for the future, to be quite honest. So
yeah, I mean, it's always easy to make a fortune off the less informed in fantasy. Just a quick note on Toles for if any of you own Toles. I think it's like 3% in most leagues. 271 this year, 314 on base, OPS 772. Not all that impressive in those stats, but I mean, for a guy who's 5'9", 182, he's put up 5 home runs so far this year, 15 RBIs. And I mean, he was a decent player, but yeah, not a huge fantasy option. Just a quick note on that. But yeah, definitely if you own Bellinger, or if you own Bellinger, you get excited, and if you think you can steal him, definitely steal him. So now let's veer into some pitchers news. A couple near no-hitters this week, not all that close, but enough that we got alerts on our phones from MLB. It was Tuesday night, last night. Urias of the Dodgers carried a no-hitter into the 7th inning. That was broken up by Andrew McCutchen on a double, which was the play that Toles ended up tearing his ACL on. He probably would have been taken out due to pitch count limit. He's at about 90 at that point. So, I mean, let's start with that first before we get to the one that happened earlier today, I believe. 6 1/3 he went. That's the longest he's been at it. That's the longest outing he's had as a professional between minors and majors. I mean, what do you make of that?
I think, when talking about young pitchers, you can't, criticize teams for being careful with them regardless of, how effective they're being, because ultimately it's kind of irrelevant to a team that this guy is pitching a no-hitter from a point of, legacy and accomplishment. I mean, it's great, but they would much rather control this guy's innings and pitch count and affirm that they're healthy and that they're adjusting, because a lot of these guys have never pitched major league anything close to major league workloads, and if these teams expect these young pitchers to come in as rookies and be effective for the whole year, they can't let them pitch complete game no hitters, because their arms are just not used to that workload yet, and it's just not worth it. I know as a fantasy owner, it's very frustrating to own a young pitcher who's pulled early because of pitch limits, but you really can never. It's like I think more than like you really have to more often not expect the team to not let these guys ever pitch complete games, and just if they do pitch games this effective, such as no hitters, just take it for granted that they've been affected in the limits that they've been allowed to give, and it's just I think in modern baseball you just can't expect first or even in some cases second year pitchers to be going over 7 innings very often because we're in an era where Tommy John is so common and every week some top pitcher has a forearm strain that inevitably leads to a long-term injury that teams in this day and age are not going to let their young guys pitch veteran innings or anything close to that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that 6 1/3 was his longest outing ever as a professional.
But it was still really. Let me just say it was still a really impressive outing, like without a doubt, extremely promising.
If you do happen to own him, I hope you have other top tier pitchers to hedge your bets on that. But he had 5 strikeouts to 2 walks, in his previous 2 starts this year. Sorry, he had 4 walks apiece. So that's his biggest thing is that he's walked a lot of guys. The fact that he cut it in half essentially. I mean, you don't want to see 2 walks every game, but and he also look at his season highs so far in strikeouts with 5. You look at his pitch count numbers. He went 90 in his first start, 88 in his second, 5 2/3, 5 innings respectively, and then he threw 95 because he had the no hitter and probably wanted to see as long as it could go. But it's encouraging. I mean, he's probably going to get a longer and longer leash, not complete game long, I don't think, but as the season progresses, I expect him to improve and maybe get deeper into games.
Yeah, without a doubt, I would say the one thing too, when analyzing young pitchers' effectiveness and leashes, the thing that I've seemed to have noticed that is the easiest to associate is honestly walks and to a large extent just pitch control, because more than anything, the more these guys are able to hone in their command and avoid high pitch counts with the batters and walks. It's not even just about them being more effective just statistically, but the teams will give them a much longer leash and trust with those attributes, which I would say for long-term fantasy value is just as important, to be quite honest, especially for single-season success.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about Urias is that he has concerning walk numbers, but his stats against hitters are actually very encouraging. This year he's 164 batting average against, 1.06 ERA. Granted, 3 starts, 17 innings. He's only given up 9 hits, 2 earned runs. Walks and strikeouts are 1-to-1 ratio. But a whip of 112. So I mean, when he does get in the strike zone, he's very effective.
He's incredible, and I would say for dynasty leagues, he's been a must own for honestly a couple of years now as a prospect alone, and he's completely proving that value to be worth it and even higher. He's clearly incredibly effective in the game, and honestly, the vast majority of young pitchers have command issues because just of the command I think current modern game requires for pitchers, and he's honestly nowhere near the low spectrum of ineffective in that regard. He's totally acceptable, and I would say for single season owners, he's not going to carry you, but he's an excellent complementary piece. And if you're able to swing maybe a less consistent veteran for him, that might be an interesting move. He might tire out; his innings might be limited, but in terms of pure effectiveness, honestly, this guy is so talented. I don't think he's going to slow down. To be honest, he might get fatigued. Pitchers might adjust a little bit, but I think he's a decently safe bet. And if you can get him in a dynasty league still, which I highly doubt for a reasonable price, but if there is a situation where it's possible, he's a must-own because he's going to be a beast for years to come.
Yep. And moving on to the other near no-hitter, another NL West team hosting a NL Central team. The So German Marquez of the Colorado Rockies held the Cubs hitless through 6 innings at Coors Field until, a little bit coincidentally, Chris Bryant broke up the no-hitter with a double with no outs in the 7th, same as Andrew McCutchen broke up Julio Urias' no-hitter the night before. German Marquez, another young pitcher, I believe you mentioned him once before. I don't know if it was on the record or not. But, I mean, nothing.
I think I mentioned his name, and I was asking how to pronounce it. Yeah, I know we had that
conversation. I'm trying to remember if we had it. I'm trying to remember if we had it on a podcast or if we.
I believe it was in our preview. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, he is far from Urias' status. But he's pitching a lot more. But I don't know if you have stats pulled up, but what do you think of German Marquez?
I mean, I'll be completely honest. I'm not going to pretend to know much about German Marquez.
I didn't expect you to. I didn't know much about him.
I don't mean to come off as unprepared, but I had never heard of him as a, particularly touted young pitcher. He's 22, so, I mean, that's not to say that he doesn't have potential, but, I mean, I know he's pitching with the Cubs, but, I mean, and Coors Field was just very effective, but he also has a 4.88 ERA for the season.
Yeah.
I mean, he's clearly very inconsistent. He has his last 4 starts are 4 runs, 8 runs, 4 innings and pitch. Of 8-run ball, then 6 innings pitched of no runs, then 6 innings pitched of 5 earned runs, and then 8 innings pitched of no earned runs. So this guy is not a consistent contributor. He's clearly incredibly on and off. I don't really trust any pitcher who has to pitch at Coors Field who is not someone who is ground ball and command dominant. And he seems to be, when he's on, a very effective pitcher. But he also went from, just to reiterate this point, he went from, in those starts, 2 strikeouts, 8 strikeouts, 3 strikeouts, 8 strikeouts. So he's not, I just don't think he's viewable in fantasy because he almost perfectly is back and forth with his effectiveness, and maybe this guy in the future, once he hones his stuff in, could be an effective pitcher, but at the moment I don't think he's really a realistic fantasy option. Just clearly is too inconsistent with his command.
Yeah, I mean, just too inconsistent, got shelled in his first start of the year. Yeah, I mean, like we always say, you can't trust starters in Colorado, especially ones this young and ones who aren't all that consistent. I'm just talking about him because he had a damn impressive performance today. But so that's kind of all we have in terms of stories for this week. It's been kind of a slow week so far in terms of major stories. We're gonna move here to our segment that we like to call Here to Stay or Keep What Is, where we look at some names that are trending right now, and we're gonna judge if they're a flash in the pan or if they're worth keeping an eye on. We'll start first here. We'll go with Phillies outfielder Aaron Altherr. He hit a 3-run home run today. It was his 3rd consecutive game with a 3-run home run. Only 2 other Phillies have done that ever. It was Mike Schmidt, and I can't remember the other guy's name for my life right now. It was like Art Seminek or something. I'm sorry if anybody knew that and is offended by that for some reason. But I mean, he's been impressive this past 3 days, and I've seen his name thrown around at times. What do you make of Aaron Altherr?
I don't. Once again, I didn't really know about him much before this season. I will say he's a huge physical specimen in terms of height. He's 6'5", but he also only weighs 190, which so he has a lot of. He can probably generate a lot of power, but I don't know how much torque he really produces because he's a bit of a string bean. I will say his batting average balls in play is absurdly high at 422, which is just really, really, really ridiculous, and he will not maintain that. And then, he has 5 home runs in 24 games this year. He had 4 home runs and 57 last year. I think this guy's just getting really hot. I don't think he's once again really a long-term option. I mean, I love it when these young guys come up and get hot, but I mean, he literally has as many home runs. He literally has more home runs in the past week than he had all of last season. Actually, in all of I just don't really see him as a dependable long-term fantasy option this season. But I'd love for him to stay hot because it's always fun to have young guys with power.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are both saying keep away for now because he hasn't shown. He isn't the name brand prospect essentially. He hasn't shown anything in the past to warrant like, okay, this is what we expected from him. It's a hot streak he has. He ended up hitting 2 home runs today, but he has 4 home runs in his last 3 games.
Yeah, and 1/3 of his fly balls are going out for home runs, which is a pretty unsustainable pace.
A ridiculous home run fly ball rate. Hitting 343. Like I said, I don't know much about him. Like I said, he's tall, but he's skinny. He's like Andrew. You said 190. Andrew Toles weighs as much as him, and he's like 10 inches shorter, or not 10 inches. Yeah, about 10 inches shorter. But yeah.
Andrew Toles is jacked then. Wow.
Yeah, no, he's solid. I mean, that's why he can produce some of the power that he has. But yeah, I wouldn't jump on the bandwagon just yet. So moving on to our next subjects, David Peralta. He is having actually an overall decent year, but he lands on ESPN's most dropped players list at number 16, behind a lot of guys who are actually injured, because he's not getting much play against lefties as of late. And yeah, he didn't play today. He hasn't had a hit since April 30th.
That's a long time.
But he, out of the 8 games, he's only played in 4 of those 8 games.
Okay.
He's still hitting to the tune of 283, 15 runs scored, 3 home runs and 8 RBIs, 3 stolen bases. David Peralta was a guy that you thought could be an under-the-radar producer or a complimentary piece. But this lack of playing time is concerning. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'd say it's unfortunate Uri isn't on this podcast because he's a huge David Peralta fan and owner of him, I believe.
Yeah.
I would say David Peralta is a very solid fantasy player when playing every day as a complimentary piece, like you mentioned. But to be quite honest, if he is not going to hit lefties, I would say unless you're in a very deep league where you can afford to rotate him in, he is not worth owning because he is not an overly dominant player. He is nice, but I expect him to definitely bounce back from this hitless streak, no problem. And the Diamondbacks play in a great hitter's ballpark with a very solid offense, but if he is not going to be an everyday player, it is hard to justify owning him unless you are in a deep enough league where either your roster is deep enough where you can sub him in and out easily, or where there just aren't that many better options. I will say, since you brought up guys who are seemingly obvious regulars who haven't played that much, Jackie Bradley Jr. is a very similar situation. He's actually ridiculously cold, and he just played his first game in about a week again. Similarly today, I own him, and I'm very frustrated with the lack of playing time that he's receiving because he's been a guy in his career who just goes through slumps and streaks. It's just part of who he is. He seemingly every season has to have a period of time where he works his swing with the hitting coach, and it's very frustrating as an owner of him, where after such a career season, the management trusts him so little that at the first sign of trouble he just gets taken out for Chris Young completely. And it's very frustrating to have to find a replacement for a guy I thought would be a guaranteed starter this year. So, and he's similar, I would say, in terms of production, where they're very solid. He's probably a little bit better, but very solid, but not a star. And you can't really justify patience with them if they're not going to be everyday guaranteed players.
Yeah, I mean, in fantasy, you can't afford to have platoon players.
Exactly.
It's unfortunate David Peralta, and the thing I will say about Peralta's situation, it mentioned a little bit in a little spin on ESPN. They're saying Chris Owings, who, if you remember from StatCast from a few weeks ago, very early on had the most errors at shortstop. But as of right now, he has, 6 errors in 19 games at shortstop so far this season. So Owings is getting the play against left-handers in right field. And that is more concerning to me than Jackie Bradley being sat for Chris Young. Granted, Ed is still very concerning on the other end, but this looks like it could definitely be more.
I'd say in the long term, I agree with you 100%. Though to be benched for Jackie Bradley Jr., being benched for Chris Young in his mid-30s when you're in your supposed prime is a pretty tough pill to swallow, I would say, at the same time.
Yeah. But yeah, so, I mean, David Peralta, unless you start to see his playing time uptick, I would stay away. I'd stay away, which is unfortunate because
he's a talented player.
He'd be a very,
he's very
solid
productive.
Piece.
Yeah.
Even though he is on this slide, it's because he hasn't played consistently. So we'll move on to the next guy. We'll get to we got a couple pitchers coming up right here. The first one being from the Cardinals, a Mr. Lance Lynn, who is having a very impressive bounce back year from Tommy John surgery, which a lot of guys are prone to have. He is 4-1, 31 strikeouts so far this year, with a 2.04 ERA and a 1.08 WHIP. So he is having a very solid year for the Cardinals. A year when Wainwright is further declining. We mentioned on StatCat this week that he has, I believe it was the highest batting average against the qualified starters. It was definitely very high. So are you encouraged by Lance Lynn's start to the season?
I would say just in terms of a guy coming back from a major injury, I'm encouraged because while it's more and more guys every year are coming back effective from Tommy John, it's never a guarantee, and it's nice to see that he's been effective, but at the same time, there's a lot of luck with his numbers, to be quite honest. His batting average balls in play is .234, which is very low for a pitcher, and definitely implies a fair amount of luck from with his opposition. He's leaving he's stranding 87.9% of his runners left on base, which is I'm not really it's way above his career average. I'm not really sure what the standard is for left on base percentage, but I would assume it's in the 70s, and he is way above that. And just to top it all off, his FIP is 4.09, which is a full 2 runs higher over his ERA of 2.04. So I would say, Lance Lynn's is a pretty solid and talented pitcher when he when his prime. From 12 to 15, he was definitely one of the better threes and I would say third starters in the game, give or take, maybe 2 if you're really pushing it. Yeah. And I think he'll be an effective fantasy producer for the rest of the season, but he's not going to be an ace. He's not going to keep up these ace statistics, and he's going to come back to earth. And I would honestly consider selling high. Honestly, if you can convince someone that he's back better than ever, because I just don't see this lasting. And I don't think he's going to be carried by this Cardinals team either, particularly so. But it's nice to see that he's at least effective post Tommy John for his sake.
Yeah, and like you said, his FIP isn't all that good. Like his the advanced stats don't tell a very encouraging story. He's only gone over 6 innings once, and that was he went 7 in a win against the Pirates on April 17th. Easily his best start of the year. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just I actually kind of agree with you completely now hearing all those stats. Yeah, he's not going to keep this up, and the other numbers don't indicate that it's all that close. What do you think, though? Do you think from where we've seen him in the past, do you think he could still be a solid option if he maybe let's say his numbers start to average out?
I think he's fine. I mean, I think he's effective if you just need another solid starter, like maybe a Tanner Roark level guy who can just kind of eat you innings and give you some wins and some just decent peripherals all around. Go for it. But if you can kind of get someone to take the bait on the hot start and get a maybe more overall effective option, I would probably consider trading him. The other thing is that a lot of guys who get Tommy John surgery have future injuries. That's not completely uncommon. So it just would really depend on an individual situation. But I'd say just to conclude more than anything is you should not be expecting these numbers to be sustainable in any way. It's definitely a hot start.
All right, so I mean, it seems like you and I aren't too high on anybody that we talked about tonight except Bellinger. But then again, you and I are the two most pessimistic guys. When
We're pretty pessimistic in general. Exactly.
Who sees like 2 weeks of things like, oh,
exactly.
You think straight to the MVP.
I would say, unfortunately, pairing us together means that we have a pretty similar approach where we just kind of look at very, very long-term sample sizes as the only thing we really accept as truth, or just guys who have been in the cusp for years.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, when it comes to this segment, we're going to tend to give the same answer probably over and over again, I would say.
Those of you out there who have any of the guys we're going to talk about want a ringing endorsement, we're sorry.
I don't really take risks in fantasy baseball that often, to be honest. So.
No, you can't.
Except for I added Aaron Hicks today in fantasy. That was probably the first true flyer I've taken in quite a while that I can think of.
That's not. Yeah.
And even then, that was a former number one. That was a number one prospect in baseball for I think 2 straight years. So that just shows you what I consider a risk. So.
Yeah. So we'll keep it going with here to Creep Away. We'll move on to another pitcher who I'm seeing here on MLB.com. His nickname is Dutch Oven. That will be Derek Holland, who is having.
It's a disgusting nickname.
I know. That's why I wanted to bring it up because it's just.
Oh, do you want that as your nickname? To be honest.
He's having, in terms of the superficial stats, except for wins and losses, he's 3-2, but he's got 2.02 ERA. Strikeouts numbers aren't that high. I don't think he was ever that high of a strikeout pitcher. But 1.04 WHIP, certainly down from his career numbers. I mean, we can take a look at the same stats that we did for Lance Lynn to judge it, but I mean, just on the surface, what do you make of Derek Holland? I know you and I probably haven't seen much of him this year because he's in the White Sox.
I would say once again, I'm not very optimistic.
I kind of pick.
He's not gonna have.
That were surprising.
I would say his peripherals from an advanced standpoint actually look slightly less luck based than Lynn, but once again, his batting average balls in play is .22, which is not sustainable unless you're playing Kershaw level pitcher. His FIP is a run and a half higher than his ERA. And then the one other thing I found particularly worrying was that he's giving up a fly ball rate of 46.1, but only 6.4% of those end up being home runs, which is really like that's like about 4 percentage points lower than his career home run rate. And I would really expect a lot of bombs to be hit off of him very soon. And this guy has never stayed healthy or been consistent in his career. He definitely has talent; it's undeniable. But I've honestly always kind of paid attention to him because I know he had a couple of fairly effective seasons where it seemed like he was at the cusp of breaking through as a dependable starter, pretty much on a level I would say similar to what Lynn was on pre Tommy John. But there's just no way that this guy is keeping this up. He gets hurt.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure like every time. The White Sox aren't going to support him very well, and I just don't see how his luck doesn't run out at some point. Once again, I would either say, depending on your situation, if you just need the pitching, hold on to him as long as he lasts. You might have to end up dropping him for another hot guy, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with just riding out a guy's luck, or trade him if you can convince someone that he can keep this up, maybe as a complimentary piece in a bigger trade.
Yeah, his best seasons came from 2011 to 2013, and then the past 3 years, 14 through 16, he didn't top 20 starts, and in 2014 he only went for 5 starts. So yeah, injuries have plagued him in the last 3 years.
And he was horrendous last year, just to be clear.
Yeah, in 107 innings he had a 1.41 WHIP,
And a
2.76
5
batting average
ERA.
against. Yeah, and a 4.95 ERA, and he had a 4.91 the year before, granted on 10 starts.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, we're just two pessimistic people talking about guys who don't have all that much of a huge pedigree. Just guys that I kind of found surprising were doing well.
Yeah, I'm honestly shocked he's even doing this well.
That's why that's
Pretty impressive. Honestly, credit for him for even being able to come back and be this effective on this stretch for considering his career. I would say.
That's why I put him in here. Just a side note, we talked about his nickname. His Twitter handle is @Dutch_oven45. So follow him, spam him. I mean, we'll take anybody in this program. We'll take Derek Holland. I'd like to talk to a guy who owns the nickname Dutch Oven.
Without a doubt.
So Derek Holland, if for some reason you're listening out there, we're not too high.
You know, we
your,
just trashed.
We're not too high in your projections going forward, but we'd love to have you on the show sometime.
Yeah, definitely respect any guy who just embraces such a nickname.
Yeah, and you're major leaguer anyways. That's impressive in and of itself.
Without a doubt.
We're just two assholes talking about fantasy. The next
it's a dream.
Yeah, yeah. If only we could get paid for doing this eventually. The next guy on our list here, Marwin Gonzalez of the Houston Astros. He's on top of the most added list. I'll let you talk about him. You're the one who put him in here. What made you want to look at Marwin Gonzalez?
Yeah, so I'd say this is a guy I'm pretty kind of 50-50 on, because if you're in a really deep league, he might just be a worthwhile option because, one, he's played every position except for pitcher and catcher with the Astros the past few seasons, and this year I think he's already played 3 or 4 positions.
Yeah,
and I'm sure
on ESPN he's got eligibility at first, third, and outfield.
Yeah, and he could even gain more positions throughout the season. He's their super utility guy, and I would say his batting average balls in play, which I know I really use, but I love this stat. It's really just, in my opinion, a better version of batting average for killing a guy's luck, is 213, while his batting average is 271. So that seems to demonstrate he could be hitting on a lot higher average. But at the same time, his ISO power is 414, which is like absurdly higher than anything else he's ever done in his career. I think his second highest in a major league season is 163, so there's no way his power is sustainable at all. But he is in a high octane offense, relatively speaking. There'll be run scoring RBI opportunities, and if you're in a league where you can just keep guys that you can just sub in to replace off-day or injured guys, we have enough room. I actually kind of like him in that situation because, he's never been a particularly great bat in his career, but at the same time, he's not an awful player by any means. And I think if with the right expectations, he can be an effective bench player in a league, but there's no way that he's maintained this. He has 9 home runs already this year in 26 games, and his highest ever is 13 in 141. His highest pace was 12 in 120. So this is a pretty lucky and, honestly, to be completely honest, really suspicious power outbreak. I would say, honestly, at this point, this is just straight up suspicious. I know it's extra pessimistic and cynical for me, but that's honestly an unreasonably great breakout. I think Edwin Encarnacion level, which I will never believe was completely natural. So not to just give Edwin some shade for no reason. I love you, Edwin. Keep up the good work. Keep up the parrot home run celebration. But yeah, Marwin Gonzalez is not going to keep this up. I know this is the millionth time we've stated that, but if you like just having a utility guy, go for it. I think is actually very good for that role.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's not going to produce the power numbers, or at least he shouldn't going forward. But like you said, his average compared to his BABIP was very encouraging. At least he just got back in line today after a foot injury. Missed 2 games, Sunday's game and yesterday Tuesday's game. He went 1 for 4 today, back in the lineup after. But before that, he was 8 for 16 with 4 homers to begin the month of May. So yeah, I mean, his flexibility really makes him more attractive to people. I have Brandon Drury on one of my teams. I use him for the same purpose. A bench guy who has decent production, but he can slot in most anywhere. So, yeah. So, I mean, this is probably the highest we've been on a guy tonight so far.
That's not saying much, but yeah.
No, but I mean, this is kind of a soft here to stay. Not necessarily for like his power stats, but we know he can produce somewhat. At least in that offense, he can have plenty of opportunities, and he can easily feed off of all the guys in that offense.
I would definitely sell him for a more consistent player if you're able to
I mean,
swing that deal as well.
Better options than Marvin Gonzalez in terms of feeling safer, but if it works out, it works out, and not going to be totally surprised if it does. We'll move on to a guy that you mentioned just a little bit ago, Aaron Hicks, who I have, even though he's a Yankee, I have a certain affinity for because he is a Long Beach guy, born in San Pedro, my hometown, Longshore son, so I like him, and it seems like you like him. You added him recently.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Hicks I've followed for a while for some strange reason. I actually have no idea why, but he's almost Byron Buxton light, I would say. Overall, he was hyped up pretty highly for the Twins when he was coming through the minors. He actually used to be a great base stealer. I don't really know what happened to that, but like seemed to leave his game. He isn't really quite as much of speedster as he used to be, and I'm pretty iffy on. I'm pretty once again 50-50 on him. The biggest issue I would say is one, his batting average balls in play is well above his career averages, though I will say his batting average matches it pretty well, which would seem to imply that he's just making a lot of hard contact and he's just been consistently hot. He's always been a talented, though very consistent player with his bat, so if he just found a way to put it kind of together, I wouldn't be shocked. He seems to really like playing in Yankee Stadium, but the biggest issue for me more than anything is that he's a fourth outfielder with three very entrenched starters in Gardner, Ellsbury, and of course now Aaron Judge. And Matt Holliday also plays outfield occasionally, while the Yankees rotate a lot and putting those guys at DH various days, and Ellsbury and Gardner are really both healthy at the same time. Once Hicks starts cooling down, it might be hard for him to find consistent playing time. But I think he's really hot right now, and if you're in need of an injury replacement outfielder right now, he is a great option to ride out. And from an advanced metric standpoint, I wouldn't say anything really stands out as particularly egregious that I can see at the moment. I mean, everything's above his career averages without a doubt, but nothing. It seems more that he's really hot than really lucky, which I think there is a difference, and his approach to the plate just seems to have shifted a little bit to be, I think, more patient. His walk percentage is by far the highest in his career. I think that's, and his K percentage is by far the lowest. I think that's just really, really helping him a lot. He is the only time in his major league career that he has a positive walk to strikeout ratio, or above 1. So I think that's more than anything the biggest reason. So I would say more than anything, his role is going to hurt his fantasy value than his actual ability or luck so far.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely trust you on the Yankee stuff, and you said he's another kind of a victim of circumstance. It's going to be tough for him to find playing time once he starts to cool down, like you said. But yeah, I like your idea of an injury replacement. Yeah, I mean, I think he's had. I mean, you probably know this better than I, but the last couple of years, the Yankees, he's had some hot streaks, but then he's never been able to get that playing time.
Yeah, this is definitely the longest run he's had, I would say, of consistent playing time and effective play. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to be like act like he's useless. He's really hot right now. I mean,
Yeah.
he's one of the most added players in fantasy baseball right now. He's having a great season. But it's hard to you can't really make the case for him as a guaranteed contributor going forward, I would say, unfortunately. But I would say that's kind of why I put him with Marwin Gonzalez. I would say he's the outfield equivalent of Marwin Gonzalez because I think he has eligibility in multiple outfield spots, and he's like the utility outfielder in Yankees, so he plays not every day, but a lot of games, and he's been hot and he's an effective bat. So I think once again, if you can trade him for a more everyday piece, riding his hot streak, go for it. But if you also have a large roster or in a deeper league where you can afford to keep a guy like him, I would 100% do it because I think he is a useful guy to sub in and out if you have that luxury.
Yeah, I think he's worth keeping in the right situation, like you said. And again, we always come back to it with a lot of guys. Take advantage of the less informed in your league. That's the biggest advice we can give.
It seems overly simplistic, but to be honest, it really is the most effective strategy in fantasy baseball.
Get ahead, sell high, buy low, guys, and keep listening to this fantasy podcast because we're gonna tell you which guys says sell high, buy low on. So we'll move on. The last guy we have on this list, haven't heard much about him in a while, but Gyorko. Which I did not know how to pronounce his name until somebody said it. But Gyorko, who is on the Cardinals, I'm sorry, I don't have his stuff in front of me right here. But, I mean...
He's starting... I mean, he seems to be playing every day.
Yeah.
In most leagues, he's probably one of the few effective second basemen who are a free agent, I would say. He's getting added up quickly. I don't think his role is going away anytime soon as long as he keeps up playing effective baseball. I guess the Cardinals do rotate a lot with their pitch position players just because they have a lot of similar, talent. I would say similarly talented outfielders and infielders who they kind of mix and match. But they have a decent amount of injuries right now, and Gyorko has always been a talented offensive player who just has struggled to have a consistent everyday role in the league, but he used to, at one point, was a very highly touted offensive second baseman, and his advanced stats once again I wouldn't say aren't similar to all these guys, are definitely put luck into it as a factor. His ISO power is very high for his career. His batting average while in play is also very high, but at the same time,
ridiculous BABIP, 424.
Yes.
That is.
Oh, I have 397. That's interesting.
I'm on MLB.com.
Okay, I was looking at Fangraphs. It's kind of, like I said, they probably have different formats, but still, it's very high.
It might be an update thing. Sometimes.
Yeah, that's also very possible.
MLB.com, I'm sure, is a lot more current.
The one thing that's kind of disappointing is that it doesn't look like his approach to the play has changed much. He's kind of walking and striking out the same career level. But I would say, there's been a lot of I'm like a Roude owner as well. I know he's been very disappointing this year in second base. I don't think, unless I'm totally missing a lot of guys in my head, I don't think it's been a particularly great fantasy baseball position this year. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but just when I've been thinking about it, most of the guys I own Ian Kinsler also, he's been very cold. I own DJ LeMahieu. He hasn't been particularly effective. Most of the guys that have been workhorses that I can think of, Cano has been good but not great. Haven't been too awesome this year. So I would say, if you do need a second baseman, he's talented offensively, and unfortunately Colton Wong's also playing right now, and he's probably the more likely long-term option with them, who I would also consider adding him. But he is Gyorko, I would say, is a better straight-up offensively productive player, even though his playing time isn't as guaranteed. So I would say if you do need right now a second baseman, if you're struggling, I would add him because he's hot right now, and he's not someone that this production is so egregious that it's just going to instantly end. but unfortunately, I wouldn't tag him as a long-term contributor. He's not going to have the 30 run. I would say it's not very likely it's the 30 run home season that he's on pace to have at the moment.
Yeah, 30 homer, and he said run home.
I'm run home.
But yeah, I mean, he also has some third base eligibility, but last year
And shortstop, so he's
shortstop, yes.
There for
He
sure.
could be a good. But the Cardinals Peralta was out a lot last year, right?
Yeah, Peralta was hurt
Yeah,
for most of the
yeah.
year.
So that helped Gyorko get a lot of playing time and allowed him to get pretty much a full season to get that 30 home runs. So yeah, the fact that he's going to be that guy shuffling around the infield is discouraging, and he's batting .351 so far this year. His career average is .244, and like I said, his BABIP is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, maybe if you need some extra pop out of a utility guy, but
yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of second basemen have been long-term guys, like I was saying before, like also as well.
Yeah.
Brian Dozier, Pedroia, depending on what you think of him, Zobrist, D. Gordon haven't been very effective. Joe Panic, Brandon Phillips aren't really.
He's batting .306.
And in my points league, he isn't really generating like a lot of points, but I would say his peripherals aren't too bad. But I would just say it's not a year where the second basemen have come out strong. I would say the only consistent year producers who have had a particularly good start are Murphy, Carpenter, Cano, and to a lesser degree Altuve, who I'd say is off his prime stats, but is still effective. So I think there is room to add Gyorko as a stopgap measure, but he's by no means a long-term option.
Yep. So as high as we got on a guy tonight, not named Cody Bellinger, was 50-50, I believe. So
yeah,
so there's
stopgap.
So those are the guys that we have for here to stay.
This is the doldrums of fantasy baseball.
Yeah. Well, this is what you get when you put the two guys who always fight Uli on his predictions.
Trey Turner lover.
Jeez. Like I said, I'm feeling for Uli tonight. I'm not gonna spout his Trey Turner love like he always tries to do. But we'll move on. We'll wrap it up looking at the weekend preview. Not a whole lot of great matchups. It was not. I mean, there's really only 3 solid matchups. This weekend. Start with the Cubs at the Cardinals. Cubs are surprisingly 500. I mean, they got swept by the Yankees. They got swept, right?
I believe so. At the very start of their run, I think that's actually what started it.
Yeah, so I mean they got swept by the Yankees at home. This week they.
Oh, the Cubs. Yeah. Sorry, for some reason I thought you said.
Oh.
I was reading Cardinals because that's who they're playing. But yeah, they swept both games, I believe.
The Yankees swept the Cardinals and Yankees, and the Cubs got swept at home.
Yeah. Yeah. Which. They are cold for sure right now, and the Cardinals are heating up. So.
Yeah, the Cubs lost 3-0 to Colorado today. Like I said, they lost 10-4 yesterday and were they almost got no hit today, sorry. But they lost 10-4 yesterday, and Monday Monday was postponed, so did they play 2 games yesterday?
The Cubs did, yeah. The Cubs played a doubleheader yesterday.
Yes, and they split it with Colorado. So they lost 2 out of 3 at Coors Field. Which is a tough place to play.
So they lost 5 out of 6. So they are dead in the water at the moment.
It is very concerning with the Cubs and the Cardinals, who are on top of the NL Central, 1 game ahead of the Reds. Only 5 games to 500. They've had a above average year. They're on a 6-game win streak. So this weekend series in St. Louis, it's doesn't look good for the Cubs, but maybe this could turn it around. Maybe they need this rivalry series on the road to turn it around. But,
yeah, I mean, I would say there's past playing a horrible team. The thing that tends to help teams break a slump the best is playing a rival. But
yeah.
Do you know what the pitching matchups are by chance?
I can go through those as quick as I can.
Okay. No worries. But I would say just to kind of start discussing what else is involved in that series. Javier Baez is been very effective the past week or so. He's made a change in his mechanics, I believe, I think it was leg kick related, to just kind of swiften his pace to the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Is he
think
not flipping the bat all the way over like he?
maybe that was it.
Normally?
I know it was a mechanical change. I
Because that's
saw
got
it.
him in trouble before. Like when he loads, I can't remember if
That's
he
what
was
it
electric or
was.
not, but he flips
You're
the
right.
bat.
No, it was the loading.
Yeah, he
You're
goes
correct.
Julio. He goes Julio Franco.
Yeah. Um,
I love that guy.
and it seems like that's been a very big help for him.
Mhm.
He's also seems to just be, I know as a minor league player, his biggest issue is strikeouts and patience, and it seems like he's finally maturing as a hitter. The talent and the power has always been there. I don't think he'll ever quite live up to what he was kind of hyped up to be at one point as a straight raw player. Um, at least not for another couple of years, but from a fantasy perspective, he's another middle infielder who's heating up, and if you do need help, he's a young guy, I would say, in a dynasty league. If you do need the help,
Mhm.
and you're looking for a long-term option in your middle infield, he is definitely worth checking out because he should really only go up from here. His role will only increase from here, and he's playing a very good lineup of lots of protection where he should get on base and be offered lots of run scoring and RBI opportunities.
Yeah. So to answer your question about the pitching matchup, it'll Friday is Butler versus Leak. If that intrigues you, Butler,
Who's Butler? I'm gonna be honest.
he's 0-0. Eddie Butler, he's 26.
Uh,
Um,
26-year-old rookie starting pitcher.
well, not exactly a rookie. This is
Oh,
his debut this year.
okay.
He debuted in 2014. He was drafted by the Rockies in the first round. He's 6-16 in his career with a 6.5 ERA
Outstanding.
across 36 games, 28 of those starts. So yeah, against Mike Leake, who's 4-1 so far this year.
Mike Leake's been really hot this year, so
Yeah, he's been really consistent.
I'm riding him in fantasy. I would say this is another start that honestly, not the Cubs are an easy lineup, but I see no reason where he doesn't keep his pace going. To be quite honest,
Yeah.
he's been incredibly good in a bounce back season after disastrous 2016.
Yeah. So then you look at so then going to Saturday's matchup. Let's see, where are they? It'll be John Lester versus Michael Wacha. That could be a very interesting game.
Yeah, I could honestly. John Lester's had not his peak prime years, definitely a decline, but very effective. And I haven't really followed fairly effective. I haven't really followed Walker so far this year. I'm not sure how consistent he's been. I know last year he really took a giant step back. Not quite Shelby Miller-esque,
No,
but
not that, but
nothing to be proud of. And it looks like this year he is
he's
been
bounced back a little bit.
very effective. So that should
Yeah.
be a good pitcher's duel. I would not really expect any. I would not expect that to be a very high scoring game
Yeah.
by any
And
means.
then Sunday is TBD versus TBD. I mean that's it.
That's my favorite matchup.
That's a barn burner right there. That's hard
About as
to
good as
choose.
it gets.
So yeah, so that'll be a very interesting series to see if the Cubs can use that to turn it around. After losing 5-6 to the Yankees and the Rockies. Speaking of the Rockies, our next matchup is against the top two teams in the National League West, separated by a game and a half. The Dodgers will visit Coors Field for 4 games starting tomorrow. I mean, it's at this point where we're getting close to where teams start to level out, and the Rockies are staying there at the top of the division. The Dodgers are starting to get hot. They just swept the Pirates. They won 5 in a row. They've bracketed a 3 out of 4 skid in the middle of last week with 5 in a row win streaks, so they're heating up. So this will be very interesting. Dodgers historically have problems in Coors Field. So this is very. I mean, what do you make of the Rockies this year? And is there anything to watch in this matchup?
Yeah, this Rockies team reminds me a lot of the 2007 Rockies team that made the World Series, to be honest, where they just had so much offense that it didn't really matter who was pitching. And I actually don't think this Rockies team, there's any reason it's going to slow down. They have one of their best staff in quite a while. They have a lot of young guys who don't really get shelled. I'm not saying they're aces by any means, but they do about as well as you can. And this is a Coors Field matchup where, for once, I'd actually say it might not be that unbelievably high scoring. I'm not, because both the Dodgers obviously have had a pretty good staff this year, but at the same time, both these teams have high power, have very effective hitters on both sides. So I think it could honestly go either way, depending on. This just shows how prepared I'm. Depending on who's pitching each day, I'm not positive. I'm trying to find which the matchups are.
Yeah,
But
I have the matchups here. Ryu is going against.
he's coming back off the DL.
I believe he's already made a couple starts since.
Oh, he is? Okay, I thought he was on the 10 still. I
No,
think it says coming off Thursday. Okay.
Okay,
So,
yeah. So, yeah, he hasn't pitched since April 30th. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. Against Anderson.
So that could be a high scoring one, I would say.
It always seems like when the Dodgers play the Rockies in Coors Field, the Dodgers' biggest bugaboo offensively is they can't get guys to score when they're in scoring position. They can certainly power their way to wins, but a lot of times that's when they have issues. And so like their pitchers would do very well. Kershaw's going to go on Friday. But the Dodgers lost 2 out of 3 when they visited Coors Field earlier in the year. So yeah, like you said, but they always seem to explode for one game. So I would look at tomorrow to be that game. Friday, mentioned Kershaw going. He's going to face Tyler Chatwood, who is one of the names on the Rocky staff who is relatively solid, 3-4 so far this year. But I don't know why he always seems to bug the Dodgers. He's a kid from Redlands, so maybe that's something to do with it. But I mean, Kershaw's Kershaw. What else can you say? Looking ahead to Saturday, let's see here. Alex Wood will be going against TBD. Alex Wood has been very solid so far this year.
I will say Alex Wood has never been one to always be consistent for a whole year. And yeah, like you said, he's been quite effective. So this might be his turn to kind of come back down to earth a little bit at Coors Field against a very effective lineup.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, TBD. We always love that pitcher. I mean, he's the ultimate.
He's the ace of the major leagues, to be honest. And always dependable.
Yeah, he's always gonna make that start. And then Sunday, apparently, Alex Wood is gonna go again for the Dodgers, and TBD is gonna go for the.
That's a bold strategy.
Yeah, wow,
but I like it.
Yeah, I mean, let me see. I'm gonna look at something else to see what pops up because. I was looking on one of my apps. I'm looking at MLB.com for those matches. But I was looking at one of my apps earlier, and on the face before you click on like the actual like matchup, it'll show you the pitcher matchups, and it said Kershaw was going tomorrow and Friday. But then when I clicked on Kershaw's first day, it said Ryu. So we'll see what happens when I look Sunday really quick. But so TBD is going both Saturday and Sunday for the Rockies. We know that for sure. But the Alex Wood on Sunday is wrong.
Oh well, that's the end of the world, I guess. I guess we'll get to blame Major League Baseball for that.
Yeah. See, it will
bizarre.
be Urias on Sunday, so he'll give it a go in Coors Field. So that's a little bit concerning for me, but yeah,
it's a good test for him.
It's
to
a
be
good
quite
test.
honest.
Yes, I can't off the top of my head. I can't remember if he pitched there last season, but if he's gonna be in Dodgers for a long time, he's gonna learn how to pitch there. And we'll finish up with your team, their matchup this weekend. the Yankees will host the first place Houston Astros. This, I think, is probably in terms of
there should be a lot of home runs hit this weekend.
a
between
lot
two
of home runs,
games.
a lot of offense. I would not invest in pitchers.
Without
for
it.
this,
So we have Keuchel versus Pineda. Keuchel has been really effective this year, but he's also notoriously better at home than on the road. And this Yankees lineup is very hot. I think their lowest scoring game in quite a while was yesterday against the Reds with 3. I think this is a good chance that they ding him for 2. I'm dinging for a couple, and then they're going against Pineda. Pineda is a notoriously up and down pitcher. I see no reason to not expect the Astros offense to be pretty effective against them. Then we have McCullers, Montgomery. Montgomery's a pretty unproven, younger but fairly talented Yankees pitcher. He has not go many innings, so if you want to believe that to an opinion on bullpen, the Yankees bullpen, if they can get an early lead, the Astros, this might be a very high scoring game because the Yankees bullpen has almost no depth. It goes really 4 deep at most, and I doubt any of those guys would pitch without a lead, except for maybe Adam Morin. So, and McCullers is pretty damn effective. There's a good chance the Astros, I would say, win this game and scored very decent amount of runs. So this might be a safe McCullers bet because I think he's going to have a lot of support and can get the win regardless of the Yankees' offense. And then as also he just pitched 7 innings of no-run ball against the Angels as last game, which no matter what you say about no matter what you feel about the Angels' offense, that's still a very good start to come off of. And then this last start is Fierce versus Severino. Or is it Fires? Fires. Yeah. He has been putrid this year. He's given up a ton of bombs. The Yankees, I think, are honestly going to smash him to pieces. I would be really surprised if they don't take advantage of him at home. And I think he's also a terrible road ERA. Yeah. And I think Severino has been very effective this year, but he has been dinged a couple times. The Astros have a good offense of effective hitters. There's no reason for me to expect that. He could pitch great, but it's a pretty. If you want Ioman fantasy, I'm probably going to start him and ride him. But this game is probably going to be the opposite of the McCullers start, where I'd say the tables are flipped, where I think the Yankees are going to score a lot of runs on an Astros team, and I think enough that Severino will get enough support to be effective fantasy-wise. And then, we have to see, I guess, the wanted, what we all, been waiting all year to see, which is the great Marwin Gonzalez versus the great Aaron Hicks in the battle. That's what I'm excited for this weekend.
That is actually a 4-game set. You stopped at the Saturday matchup.
Sunday's
matchup is, it's Charlie Morton, right? I just gotta double check this. Yeah, Charlie Morton, against Masahiro Tanaka on Sunday. That would be Sunday Night Baseball. Charlie
Morton's actually been really good this year.
He's been very effective. I mean, 4-2, 3.63 ERA, 1.36 WHIP. Definitely a lot of run support. We'll see what happens against Tanaka. I don't know. I mean, Tanaka's his record's 5-1. What have you seen from him this year? And that one game,
honestly, he's been
shelling on opening day.
Really Tanaka-esque, where he has one inning, it seems that every game which gets shelled, and then he's kind of lights out for the rest. I think he'll get dinged for a decent amount for the Astros. But Charlie Morton has been very hot. I kind of have a feeling that the Yankees will kind of do what I think the Rockies will do to Alex Wood, which is kind of make his luck run out a little bit. And I think they'll give him enough support. They tend to always give Tanaka enough support to give him the win and let him go 6 or 7 strong innings, because Tanaka tends to keep his pitch counts decently low, regardless of if he has that bad inning, to at least get enough innings in to have an effective fantasy start and strikeouts.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking forward to this weekend, those 3 matchups. At least it'll be easy to keep track of the major.
I would say more than anything, for that series. The Yankees are been incredible this year at home. They just absolutely destroy the ball out of the park. They power wise, and I don't really see any reason to say that they'll see. You think that they'll stop suddenly. So
Yeah.
I would expect a lot of home runs and runs for the Yankees this weekend, regardless of because these Astros pitchers are except for Fires, none of them have been poor this year, but. To me, that's not really enough to think that the offense will be stopped at home.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have no idea what to expect from the Yankees after they swept at Wrigley. But I mean, the Astros are one of the better teams they've played in the past couple weeks. So we'll see what they can do. So that about does it for this week's edition of the Fantasy Podcast. Thank you, Rudy, for joining me on this. And thank you, Uwe, for teaching us how to record so that we can actually do it on schedule. So follow us on Twitter. Sorry that didn't send out a Facebook post for questions. That was my bad. But like us on Facebook at War and Peace Baseball. Follow us on Twitter at WPB_podcast. Any fantasy questions, any general questions, any feedback you have is greatly appreciated. This podcast, for those of you, it's on YouTube. War and Peace is the channel. iTunes, search WPB_podcast, and SoundCloud, search War and Peace Baseball. So thank you all so much for listening. And as always, Rudy.
Peace.